Hey guys, and welcome back to Z3 Cubing. These are my top 5 potential WCA events. So today I'm going to be walking through the 5 puzzles that I think would make the best additions to the WCA, or World Cube Association, which is currently the largest organizing body for competitions of Rubiks Cube type puzzles. They currently host 18 different events, including 3x3, 2x2, 4x4, all that kind of stuff. Their most recent edition was Cube in 2014, and before that the most recent edition was in 2009. So many people have called to add more events to the WCA to add variety to the cubes that people can compete in at competitions. Many people are also against that change, saying that 18 events is already enough, and that would just cause more troubles for organizers to add more. And many people have also said that they want to remove certain controversial events, but I'm going to try and stay neutral of that issue and just talk about the best potential events in my opinion. Anyway, let's get on to the first one over here. So the first cube on this list is the Redi Cube. This is a corner turning puzzle that has, of course, 8 corners and 12 edges. The edges can be kind of cycled around all around the cube like this, using those corner turning moves, and it's actually a pretty fun puzzle to solve. It can get pretty scrambled, but it's actually pretty easy to do a solution because you kind of just have to match up the pieces in a very logical way. It's kind of like a Pyraminx, the way that all the pieces are cycled around and the way that you eventually have to solve them back and get them into the right state, except of course it's a cubic shape, so it has many more pieces and it takes quite a bit longer to solve than a Pyraminx. And for a while this cube actually had quite a bit of a following to get it into the WCA. However, this cube definitely does have some problems that would prevent it from being in the WCA. For one, it is now exclusively being made by Moyu, which is one single company. So obviously, since there's no competition or anything with the hardware, there's nothing to advance the hardware and make it better. So if more cube companies were to make a cube very similar to this, that would definitely increase the viability of it being added to the WCA. But for now, I feel like the following of people actively trying to get this as an event has kind of died off, and so I don't see this becoming an official WCA event anytime soon. So the next puzzle up on this list is kind of a personal favorite that I think would make a good addition to the WCA. I don't think it's ever really had a big following of people trying to actively get it into the WCA like a lot of these other puzzles have had, but personally I think it would be a pretty good choice. And that is the Curvy Copter. Now this is a very unique puzzle. It turns on the edges instead of the corners or the faces like most other WCA events. So it would definitely add a lot of variety to the WCA and just the way that it's manipulated. Like developing finger tricks for this puzzle is something that we just haven't really seen before, and I think it would be very interesting to see how speed solving methods would develop with this puzzle. It'd be a much more drawn out and I'd say thought-provoking solve, avoiding the problem of cubes like this cube where you just spam sledgehammers over and over again until it's solved. Personally, I actually don't know entirely how to solve this cube, and I think it would be definitely interesting to see new speed cubing methods developed for it. And so yeah, that's kind of why I want to see it as a WCA event. It definitely does have some potential problems though. One main thing is you have jumbling, which as you just saw there is kind of a weird movement that happens to be possible in this cube that kind of swaps around pieces in a way that normally wouldn't be possible with the normal 180 degree moves. And I think to solve this problem, the WCA should just kind of ignore jumbling, treat it kind of like a corner twist on a 3x3, and say that it's not allowed to use jumbling during a normal solve. Obviously that also means there wouldn't be any jumbling like in the scrambling sequences, and I think just avoiding that whole possible move set would just simplify everything a whole lot and make this a much better possible candidate as a WCA event, because it just gets way overly complicated when you start doing jumbling moves. Anyway, I'd say the lack of people actually campaigning for this to become a WCA event is definitely its biggest weakness and the reason it probably also won't be included in the WCA. However, that is a problem that the next cube up on the list definitely does not have. In fact, among polls, I found by far that this is the most supported potential event to be added to the WCA. Basically what this cube is a 3x3 variation or shape mod, which is something we don't have at the moment in the WCA. Basically, it's a 3x3 changed into a different shape, where all the layers are kind of shifted in a way so that instead of each layer being defined by a different color, it's defined by a different height. And so basically instead of having a white side, you have a really tall side and a really skinny side. So instead of lining up all the similar colors to solve it, you line up all the similar heights of pieces. So for example right here, all these pieces are the same height, they all kind of match together. Here we have one complete layer, and now we have all 3 complete layers, and when it's solved, it's a perfect cube. This puzzle is already one of the most popular non-WCA events. You can pretty much find one at any single cube store. There's so many different brands and varieties. In fact, the one that I have right here is made by Rubiks. It's the only one on this list that has been made by the official Rubiks brand company. And so it definitely avoids the exclusivity problem of the Moyu Redi Cube, as well as the unpopularity problem of the Curvy Copter. And so it has to be the perfect candidate for a WCA event, right? Well, no, I think it definitely does have some problems. For one, standardization is something that you pretty much don't have on these cubes at all. Any brand of this cube that you buy could have slightly different variations on the pieces. There's no standards for like how big this layer should be compared to this layer and compared to all these other layers. There's just no defined way of how the pieces should be made, unlike a 3x3 where you just know that every single piece should be the same size. Now this doesn't really seem like a big problem now because most mirror cubes out now have pretty similar proportions, but what if it did become a WCA event and some speed cubing company came out and made made a cube that had totally different proportions, like these layers were way bigger and these layers were way smaller and everything was way off. It didn't really look like a mirror cube, but it was technically within the defined limits of the WCA as being a mirror cube, and it offered a huge competitive advantage against anyone using an older mirror cube. Those are the kind of issues that you'd have to solve if you wanted to actually make it into a WCA event. There's also the problem of stickers. Most cubes like this just have plain, identical stickers on every single face. Some of them, though, do have actual colors, which of course would have to be banned because that would make it a lot easier to solve the cube. Also, some of them have like textured lines which go in a certain direction, and so the centers would have to be oriented correctly, so you'd have to kind of make a rule to ignore those. And there's just so many different regulations, so many different things that would have to be put in place, that I think overall this isn't a very compelling option to be added, although it definitely does have a lot going for it. So the next puzzle up on this list is the Kilominx, or as some people have taken to call it recently, the Kilominx. Basically what this is it's a 2x2 version of a Megaminx. So if a Megaminx, this cube right here, which is already in the WCA, were a 3x3, this one would be a 2x2. You basically take out that whole middle layer and leave it with just corners. And so this is actually a pretty straightforward addition to the WCA if they were to add it. Much like the very next cube, it avoids a lot of the problems that the first three had. If the WCA were actually going to add a new official event, I feel like there's a pretty good chance it would be one of these two cubes. Anyway, this puzzle right here is a pretty fun one to solve. It avoids the problem of being too trivial and like too simple, while still being pretty easy to learn how to solve for a beginner. It doesn't take too long, most people can solve it in less than a minute. And overall, I think it would just be a pretty good choice for a new WCA event. An old initial version of this cube was made a long time ago by Mefferts, and this one was kind of the first speed cubable one made by Shengshao, and since then a few other companies have also made decent speed cubable ones that people could use in competition, so it avoids the problem of not having good enough hardware. Overall, I don't really feel like there's much to say against this puzzle becoming a WCA event. Some people might argue that it's a little bit boring and repetitive for how short the solve is, but I don't think that's really a problem. All this puzzle really needs at this point to actually become a WCA event is for a devoted following of people to actually present a convincing argument to the WCA for why it would add value to the WCA itself. And it has had quite a bit of a following over the years, but it would need to retain that following over a long period of time, and overall just have more people campaigning for it to become a WCA event than it currently has now. Anyway, next up we have our final cube that I think would make the best addition to the WCA out of all of these puzzles. That is the 4x4 Pyraminx. So basically, of course, what this is a Pyraminx, except made a little bit bigger into a 4x4. So it just has one additional layer over the traditional 3-layer corner-turning tetrahedron style of the Pyraminx. As you can see here, you have these 4 independent layers right here. And this is actually a pretty fun challenge to solve. It's not super obvious how to solve it like a Pyraminx, which is kind of intuitive. I think it would definitely be a much different type of addition than the Kilominx, which is also kind of more intuitive. It would be kind of more similar to the Curvy Copter, which is more method-based, kind of having to develop actual methods to solve the cube rather than just doing everything super fast. And I think that development of strategies for solving this cube, as well as the development of new finger tricks to be able to solve this cube quickly in a competitive fashion, would definitely both be valuable additions to the WCA. This cube was also originally manufactured a long time ago by companies like Mefferts, and it was also recently updated to become more speed cubable by companies like Shengshao, followed by other companies making slight variations and improvements upon the cube. However, this cube and the Kilominx would need slight improvements to hardware at the very least before becoming WCA events. Other than that, this puzzle, along with all the other puzzles on this list, are definitely possible additions to the WCA that could potentially happen. I don't really see many events being added to the WCA in the near future, but if they were to happen, they might be on this list. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video where I shared my opinions about adding events to the WCA. Be sure and let me know down in the comments below what events you think should be added to the WCA if you agree with what I said, or if you have some other opinions. And that's pretty much it for this video, and I'll see you guys next time.